All right, GRC Mafia, welcome to the party, pals. So right out of the gate here, we are here to break down barriers, foster collaboration and community, working towards a more secure future for everybody. Definitely a learning and growing environment. If you would like to come up on stage, just let me know and I can go ahead and drop a link for such. Today, we are going to go through a little bit more targeted portion of the HITRUST assessment handbook. Yesterday, I was just like skipping through some of the different sections. And one of the different sections that I noticed at the ending of yesterday's video was the caps and gaps section of that. And I wanted to kind of address that area and look into that into more depth. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that in just a moment. Definitely throughout the, this stream and so forth, ask questions, share resources, even if it doesn't pertain to what we're talking about, that's perfectly fine as well. Worst case scenario, we'll circle back around to it. And then also don't share anything you don't want to be public. If you happen to do so, reach out to me on Discord, LinkedIn, or contact@studygrc.org so we could figure out how to get that redacted. Want everybody to feel comfortable to ask questions, share resources, and so forth. If I don't know something, then I'm pretty sure I can at least get a hold of somebody who should be able to answer that question. So you guys may have heard of it before, but B-Dubs also has a blog every single Monday releasing an article for cybersecurity and GRC, and then also the ongoing CISSP study group every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Or I'm sorry, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central and Saturdays at 3 p.m. Central. Those links are in the chat right there. And then also we have our website as well. Let's see here. Plus our website here for the rest of the platforms we stream to, the calendar for the most up-to-date information, and then also a link out to our resources page. We did recently update that resources page with a bunch of changes. Looks nothing like this on the screen right now anymore. Now it's a nice clean one-page dark mode, and also links out to our resources page separately. And yes, exactly. FRC. It's a rival mafia. Welcome to the party, pal. Space Tacos, B-Dubs, Cam, Josh, Bentech, GRC Mafia. So let's go ahead and get this pulled up here. Well, that's just a white screen. Here we go. The HITRUST Assessment Handbook. And since I scheduled this video out, the links for this will be in the description below already. After this live stream, I'll go through with the rest of our live streams where there'll be chapters and everything else added as well. And I'll go ahead and drop this directly into chat too, if you guys want to follow along separately. And then we were looking at the caps and gaps section down here towards the bottom. So page 127, and then we'll probably go through and, figure out what else we want to take a look at as well. Some of the different surprising things yesterday, like we were able to get a copy of the spreadsheet itself for HITRUST, and then also we noticed that they have like the complete workflows for the assessment. So whether it's I1, E1, R2. They do provide a really nice diagram of the workflow itself, and then a complete breakdown for each step and color coded based on whose duty that is, who that is completed by, which was pretty neat. And that's in this assessment handbook itself as well. Oh, no worries, Space Tacos. Yeah, I mean, thanks for popping in as well. I mean, that's one benefit of it being recorded as well. You guys can always come back and watch it later. Definitely work and everything else. I definitely understand, Space Tacos. No worries. All right. And so this is not a big section here whatsoever, but we'll go ahead and go through this real quick. So for I1 or E1 validated assessments, HITRUST requires assessed entities to define corrective action plans, CAPs, for all requirement statements meeting the following criteria. And so CAPs is, what sounds like what they're talking about is, like POAMs, plans and action milestones. I believe Ryan used a different terminology last week, but here in the actual assessment handbook, it's talking about corrective action plans. So what needs to change? So the requirement statements that score less than fully compliant, and then associated control reference average scores less than 80% or less than 80 when considering only the core E1 or I1 requirement statements. Any requirement statements added by included compliance factors are not considered in this average score. So instance in which a core I1 or E1 requirement statement scores less than fully compliant and the associated control reference averages 80 or higher are identified as gaps instead of caps. All right, so now they're actually defining the difference between a gap and a cap, so corrective action plans. So corrective action plans is going to be below 80, so less than 80 when considering only the core, and then the gaps are going to be above 80 averages. The following diagram illustrates the process for identifying gaps and caps in I1 or E1 validated assessments. Did the requirement score fully compliant? Yes, then not a gap or cap or insights report. Does not apply to this section. If we go with no, then is the requirement a core E1 or I1 requirement statement? No. All right, insights report. All right. If that's not the case, if we say yes, it is part of the core requirements for whichever stage we're on, is the following score of the E1, I1 core requirement statements in the associated control reference 80 or higher. And then that's what's going to define out if it's 80% or higher, or I keep saying percent, but it doesn't say percent here. If it's 80 or higher, then it's a gap. If it's less than 80, then it's going to be cap for the corrective action plans here. Let's double check chat here. And then this next section here. So for R2 validated assessments, HITRUST requires assessed entities to define corrective action plans, CAPs, for all requirement statements meeting the following criteria. And so now we're talking about the R2, which is the higher end there, for that, risk year 2 that we had talked about yesterday as well. So requirement statements overall score is less than 71. Requirement statements implemented maturity level scores less than fully compliant. Associated control reference is required for HITRUST risk-based 2-year R2 certification, and associated control references average less than 71. All right. I'm assuming if it's less than that 71, then it wouldn't be considered fully compliant. And then also it has to be referenced in the R2. So I kind of feel like some of that's a little bit of a filler there, but I mean, I guess it's better to be, more precise about it than not. Instances in which a requirement statement scores less than 71 and one or more of the cap criteria are not met are identified as gaps instead of caps. The following diagram illustrates the process for identifying caps and gaps in R2 validated assessments. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure why they would change it. the R2 is supposed to be their, top tier, list of controls and so forth. So if that's the case, like, why would they be changing it up compared to the other ones here? I mean, this diagram here for the E1, for the I1 and E1 seems pretty straightforward with an 80. And then we move to the R2 and it's now 71, which means more may be able to escape a cap or gap. And so similar diagram, a little bit different language though, looking at the 71 rather than the 80. And then also, so it has to be associated control reference, 71 or higher. Okay, so if it's, so if it's 71 or higher, it's going to be a gap. 71 or low, or 70 or lower is going to be a cap. I wonder why they made that slight little difference for the R2. That seems oddly specific. Maybe even unnecessary. There had to be some type of reason why they changed that around. The AI1 or AI2 assessment will utilize the underlying HITRUST E1, I1, or R2 assessment cap and gap logic. See the flowchart below for detailed criteria. All right. And so this is supposed to be for their AI1. That's a newer thing that was briefly mentioned last week when Ryan was presenting for us as well. Was the requirement added to the assessment through the security of AI system factors? If that's a no, then observe normal cap gap rule set for the assessment type. If that's a yes, then did the requirement score at 100 if E1 or I1, or at 71 or higher if R2. So it has to score at 100 if it's E1 or I1, but only 71 or higher for an R2, which would make it not a gap or a cap. Again, that's kind of confusing language there too. Yeah, the fully compliant measurement. So the fully compliant measurement in the maturity scoring rubric says 90 to 100% range. So anything under 71 would also fall under that. Yeah, that's what I'm getting confused about, is why are they changing it up right here? That's what it looks like to me. How would you, so if you're on R2, right, and you're doing the AI one, and one of your references is only at 71 score out of 100, you're not going to consider that a gap or a cap for corrective action plan. That seems odd. 71 is not 100% or 100 score. So that's different. Do all requirements added to the control reference through the security of AI systems compliance factor average at 80 or higher if E1 or I1, or 71 or higher if R2? And so if you say yes, then gap only. If you say no, then required cap for the HITRUST AI security assessment. Yeah, I kind of feel like they could really kind of change things up compared to their maturity model here. And especially this last section for the AI one, I don't quite understand why they would, not require either or at only 71 out of 100. So now moving on to this next section. So when an R2, I1, or E1, which is the different tiers that they have for the framework, assessment enters the inputting caps and signing rep letter phase. Any requirement statements requiring caps are identified in MyCSF using the cap required requirement statement level response status. For each requirement statement with the status cap required, the uh, the assessed entity must enter a corrective action plan, which describes the specific steps that are planned to be corrected to correct the identified deficiencies. The assessed entity enters its corrective action plans by completing the CAP form in MyCSF, which includes, at a minimum, the following information. So this sounds pretty straightforward. So inside of MyCSF, we're just going to enter that information when, correction is needed here. So the name, a name to identify the CAP, the corrective action, a description of the planned corrective action that is specific, measurable, and clear enough to provide value to readers of the HITRUST report. All deficient levels and evaluative elements must be addressed by the corrective action. The status, not started at risk, started on track, and completed. Point of contact owner, name and or job title of the point of contact or owner of the corrective action plan. And then also the scheduled completion date as well. Yeah, so it seems like they're giving some lenience to if you're not fully compliant. So there's got to be something in here that also states that, like, oh, if you get 71 score on all of them, then, you're still not compliant. Like, there has to be something in here for that. Imagine going through like that R2 and, a client literally just gets everything to 72 just to get past that 71 score, and bam, you're a full send. That was one of the questions that were also asked, is like, how do they handle that when an organization needs to correct something? And since you have to go through and you have to do your assessment every so often and submit that into MyCSF, and that goes through review, we did ask, like, how is that handled? Like, if they just keep pushing this stuff back, then at what point does it actually become a problem and, like, you start declining their certification for that? I feel like that question wasn't really addressed directly, because it kind of seems like they kind of leave it up in the air, like it's by discretion. Scheduled completion date. For additional information on writing CAP, see the Appendix A13 well-written CAP examples. Maybe I'll skip down to that in just a moment, because I believe we're done with this section here. Yeah, check-ins. So we'll go down to that well-written CAP examples here in a moment. For requirement statements with the status CAP required that have a score of 72 or higher, the assessed entity may optionally accept the risk rather than plan for the remediation of the deficiency. Okay, so a score of 62 or higher, and we can accept the risk. To determine whether to accept the risk of a deficiency or define a corrective action plan, the assessed entity must perform and document a risk analysis, taking into consideration the likelihood and impact of the risk as well as the existence of mitigating controls. Bam, there we go. So, I mean, that's pretty neat. So we could still go through and accept risk, but we haven't really gone over, the scoring of 62. It seems to be on a scale of 100. And, still, what if we're at 0? What if one of these requirements is at 0 and we're like, nah, fam, we got this, we'll accept it. Let's go ahead and push that through. We go ahead and make our one-page risk analysis report on it. But it's stating here a 62 or higher with a CAP requirement. When the assessment enters the reviewing CAPS phrase, any requirement statements for which the assessed entity has entered a required CAP are identified by the requirement statement level response status awaiting CAP review. For each requirement statement identified as awaiting CAP review, the external assessor must review the linked CAPs for specification, clarity, spelling, and grammar. Additionally, for each CAP where the assessed entity has not elected to accept the risk, the external assessor must review the ability for the assessed entity to demonstrate progress against the cap. All right. And so now they're pushing it onto that assessed entity to review those caps for the corrective action plans and the gaps themselves, most likely, to figure out whether or not they're actually valid or are they doing what they can with it, which isn't a bad thing. One of the things that a lot of people point out is these assessed entities are still paid. These third-party assessors are still paid by the assessed entity. So, you know, that could be somewhat of an issue. We did go read a little bit about the third-party external assessors yesterday. Maybe that's something we could dig a little bit more into. They do have some rigorous stuff with that, but with HITRUST, it is a requirement, which, like we had mentioned during that talk last week, is that it does seem pretty similar to the CMMC process. Double check everything here. Oh, PBO popping in. Welcome to the party, pal, PBO. Yeah, it's definitely showing the additional allowances for the R2 versus the E1 and I1. I just don't understand why they would differentiate between the two. Like, why isn't there just one requirement across the board? I feel like that would be easier to follow. And then also less lenience as well. Like, you have, it's that 80 score for E1 and I1, but it's 71 for R2. That just seems a little off. And then also Cam mentions, seems like even potential more allowance in the 13.9.6 section. Yep. And like I just read here, yeah, in this last section here for the 13.9.8 is they're really pushing it onto that external assessor as well. You going live tonight, PBO? We do have our primary meeting later tonight, so 6 p.m. Central, and we'll have Chris Hildago up talking about data governance. So I mentioned this yesterday as well. He did present one version of this during his public speaking event, which is the last Tuesday of every month. But tonight he'll be giving a full presentation on this as well. Definitely something to pop in on if you have the time available. I'll drop a link to this video as well if you would like to. What I typically do is I'll go through to videos that live streams that are going to occur, and I click the notify me in the bottom left of the video personally, just so that way I make sure that I actually get the push notification itself. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. Here, I'm kind of curious. I'm actually going to copy this here. And I'm going to prompt this. So this is page, all right, so this is page 123 to 126. So 3 pages. So I'm going to go ahead and print this off, save it as a PDF. I'm going to go ahead and do custom 123 to 126. All right, and I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop open AI here, and I'm going to ask it a few questions here. And I'll pull it up here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and prompt this here. So I have just the cap and gap section in here, and then I'm just going to ask it like, carefully review this section of the HITRUST assessment handbook and provide insight into what scoring this references and why R2 would be different. 71 versus 80 score. I'm just kind of curious if it's going to be able to tell me, because it's most likely in a different section of this document that explains the scoring that it's referencing here, but we haven't gone through the full 270 pages. And then also on top of that, I'm kind of curious if maybe this could give us a little bit of insight into like why it would be different for the R2, or if they're just trying to give more lenience to it. Which I would find kind of odd because the R2 is supposed to be like the big boy. Welcome to the party, fan. Oh, Mr. ISO. GRC MAFIA. Yeah, the data governance one tonight is going to be pretty awesome. And then we also have some additional talks that I'm going to get scheduled out for next month that are pretty awesome as well. And then since we have the 5 weeks this month, next Thursday, we also have Cam, who is going to be presenting for the MITRE Atlas framework for AI as well. And then we'll be like talking like as a group about AI in GRC, and then also like that risk portion of it, especially, I mean, it's such a huge topic and so forth. There's a lot of information already out there. Like the couple conferences that I went to, so much AI. So I'm kind of curious what it's going to say here. So to address the user's query, okay. The scoring in the HITRUST assessment handbook pertains to the evaluation of requirement statements within control references for different assessment types. All right, yeah, I got that. So criteria for CAPS, fully compliant, a score less than 80, scoring context, fully compliant. All right, in HITRUST, scores are generally on a 0 to 100 scale for I1 and E1. The score of a requirement statement is likely based on the implemented maturity level, where fully compliant means 100%, or the maximum score, i.e. 5 out of 5, if a 0 to 5 scale is mapped to 0 out of 100. The control reference average score is the average of the implemented maturity level scores for all core requirement. All right. And then it has the difference here for the R2 scoring context. Why? Okay, so why is R2 different? 71 versus 80. The difference is in thresholds, 80 for I1 and E1 versus 71 for R2, arises from the distinct nature, scope, and scoring methodologies of these assessments. So I1 and E1, these are less comprehensive, tailored assessments focused primarily on the implemented maturity level. They assess whether controls are effectively implemented, making them narrower in scope. The higher threshold of 80 for the control reference average reflects a stricter requirement for implementation, aligning with their purpose and ensuring a baseline level of security through implementation. R2, this is a risk-based 2-year certification assessment that evaluates a broader set of maturity levels. All right. Its comprehensive nature means the overall score reflects not just implementation, but also the maturity supporting processes, making it a more holistic evaluation. So the R2, the threshold applies to the overall score, a weighted average of 5 maturity levels, because of the overall score dilutes the impact. Okay. All right. So I'm starting to understand a little bit better if this is correct. You know, we all know that AI definitely does hallucinate. But so basically what it's showing here is that I1 and E1 is more narrow in scope, whereas the R2 would have to take into account the policy. They mentioned the policy, the procedure implemented, measured, and managed. And additionally, the implemented maturity level is separately evaluated, ensuring implementation weaknesses are still addressed. Risk tolerance and certification goals. So that makes a little bit more sense. So the R2 threshold is lower, 71 versus 80, because it measures a broader maturity profile, not just implementation, and it's calibrated to certification standards. All right. Bam. Well, that should give us a little bit of info there. Let's see. I'm going to double check chat here. Oh yeah, Bentech mentions Mr. Osint and Mr. Nis in the same room tonight. Oh gosh. Cam. James Harden, since he's Mr. Osint. I mean, hey, if you're asking for it, Cam, we could throw PPO and Chris in a room together. Or a cage. Correct. So yeah, the broader assessment and overall course of the 2-year for the R2 actually makes sense why it would have a lower threshold. Yeah. After AI kind of explaining a little bit more on why it would be different, it makes a little bit more sense now because of that scope. Bam. That pretty much covers the caps and gaps section that we just went over here. And so that's page 123 to 126 within this PDF itself. If you guys have any other questions, if I don't know the answer, there's other people in the community that work with HITRUST, or we could also send out a message out to Ryan as well. He's very willing to answer questions and so forth. And he did state that one of the best places may also be LinkedIn, but he did share his email as well. I'm going to go ahead and drop his LinkedIn if you guys would like to connect with him as well. And then one of the things that I may just start doing is, just because I wanted to learn more about this, I wanted to go through and just start picking out these different sections of the HITRUST risk assessment handbook. And then we did find yesterday that they do have a risk management handbook as well. That we'll probably go through as well. We could just kind of knock this out in multiple different videos, of course, and then kind of piece it together in a playlist. They do also have a webinar series as well. So I'm going to go ahead and skim back up here towards the top. So in this first part here, here we go. So in this first part, in the introduction, they list out these additional resources. So you can go through and take a look at the risk management handbook. You can also download the actual CSF framework itself with some of the help docs and the spreadsheet. And then they also have their advisories here, but then there was also a section here for the webinar as well. Here we go. So if you click on that section there that said external assessor resources, then they also have this watch the assessment handbook webinar series. And I find this to be a really good walkthrough as well. I believe when I counted this up yesterday, it came out to about 4.5 hours worth of webinars that's walking through this assessment handbook. I do plan on going through these videos as well. And this would be a really good starting point too. I just want to learn more about this and try to pick out what they have available. So I'm going to drop a link to that webinar series as well in chat, and then we'll probably start bringing this to an end here in just a moment. Somewhat of a shorter video, about 40 minutes, but we definitely still covered what the purpose was, and then also I'll be catching you guys tonight at 6 p.m. as well. If you guys have any questions or otherwise, definitely drop that in chat. I dropped these links already. And then, of course, you guys can catch us in Discord outside of our live streams, drop questions there and so forth. And then also, I don't even remember if I mentioned it, but you guys can also hop into our Discord server in order to share your personal LinkedIn, Blue Sky, X, whatever social media profiles you have in order to connect with the rest of the community as well. So Cam mentions it would be actually very educational content to have an instance or control need presented and debate how it would be addressed from a Mr. OSINT and Mr. NIST perspective. I mean, hey, we're going to have them both in the same room tonight. So, we could see what happens. One of the different problems, though, is the fact that ISO is a paywall framework. So, that's one of the different problems. So like Chris Hildago is a ISO lead auditor. He has a certification for such and so forth. It's not an easy thing to obtain, which is awesome and everything else. And I'm sure he'd be able to do so. But I don't think that's something you could just publicly publish online or otherwise because it's paywalled. So he wouldn't be able to like, oh, I'm going to use this control and that because of this, and this. But we could see what happens. Yeah, thanks for popping in, Josh. GRC Mafia. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bring this portion to an end, and then we'll go ahead and pick these up and schedule some of these out for the rest of this month as well. By the end of this, we should be able to go all the way through this document. And also, I'm going to check out this webinar series as well. Definitely recommend taking a look at this. Over like 4.5 hours worth of content of them going through and explaining it out. So bam, GRC Mafia. I will catch you guys later tonight at 6 p.m. With Chris Hildago and data governance. Of course, after his presentation, we'll go through, open up the stage, have open discussion and everything else as well. So if you guys have any questions or otherwise, that's also a really awesome time to do so. But you guys have a great rest of your day. GRC Mafia. Let's finish out